Welcome back to the Bring Our Troops Home podcast. The war in Iran is in an official timeout, so we decided to take inventory on America's involvement in the war thus far. On Tuesday night, immediately after President Trump announced a ceasefire with Iran, our organization, Bring Our Troops Home, released the following statement. We support this 2-week ceasefire and hope it develops into a negotiated conclusion to the Iran war. The United States does not benefit from an extended destabilizing conflict waged in violation of our own laws. Let this be a start to our disengagement from the Middle East as we reorient to putting our own house in order, securing our borders, developing domestic energy production, and putting America first. That's where we stand. That's where we've always stood, and we're grateful for the ceasefire, and we pray that it holds, and we pray that it leads to lasting peace in the Middle East. And we pray that America can finally bring our troops home from a conflict that is not our own, from an area of the world that does not affect our own security, on behalf of a nation that is not truly our ally. Now, that last part, not truly our ally, is going to be controversial, and I know that, but we're going to get into that a little bit later because I think it's the key to the entire ceasefire and ultimately towards peace. But before we talk about the hard truths, I want to be clear about where I stand this morning. Any rational human being should consider this ceasefire a victory, not because of what we achieved, but because of what we avoided. War, total war, is that bad. It's so bad that even absorbing some humiliation, accepting some terms that look like a loss on paper, is still better than the alternative. People who have fought wars, they understand this. The global war on terror veterans who went to Iraq and Afghanistan and Yemen and Syria, they understand this. People who have buried their friends from war, they understand. People who have seen what happens when the bombs fall, the bullets fly, and the medevacs land, they understand this to their core. Almost anything is better than total war. So yes, we're grateful and we should be. But gratitude does not mean silence, and relief does not mean we stop asking questions. Because the terms of this ceasefire, they tell a story. The price that we paid tells a story. And what we do next as a country, what we do in the next 2 weeks, will determine whether any of it was actually worth it.
In the councils of government, we must guard against the acquisition of unwarranted influence, whether sought or unsought, by the military-industrial complex.
Let me walk you through what Iran proposed in their 10-point plan for the ceasefire, because the President Trump, accepted their 10-point plan as the basis for the negotiations. These are not America's terms. These are Iranian terms. And our president, he said yes. So the first point is the Strait of Hormuz. Before this war of choice, commerce and international shipping flowed through the Strait of Hormuz freely. No toll, no tribute, open water. Now, Iran gets to charge a toll, a tax, $1 per barrel of oil that passes through the strait. That's roughly 21 million barrels a day. 21 million barrels a day in passage fees paid to Iran every single day. That's over $7.5 billion a year, revenue that Iran did not have the ability to generate before we started bombing. We went to war and we made them richer. Point number 2, their government gets to remain intact. The president has claimed several times now that regime change was never a primary war goal, but he also asserted that it happened anyway because we killed everybody. He said the original leadership was killed or removed. He said that we're now dealing with more rational people. In fact, here's his direct quote.
I think we'll make a deal with them, pretty sure. Whether it's possible, we won't. But we've had regime change, if you look already, because the one regime was decimated, destroyed. They're all dead. The next regime is mostly dead. And the third regime, we're dealing with different people than anybody's dealt with before. It's a whole different group of people. So I would consider that regime change. And frankly,
but that is not what regime change means. Regime change, as any political scientist or analyst or any person with a dictionary can define, involves an outside power transforming how a country is governed, not just killing the people at the top, but changing the entire system. And that didn't happen. The Ayatollahs are still in control of Iran. The Islamic Republic, it still exists, and the new supreme leader, Mojtaba Khamenei, has stronger ties to the Islamic Revolutionary Guard than his father did. This regime is more hardline, less prone to compromise, and frankly, more nakedly tied to the IRGC. And we've seen the decapitation of the reigning leaders, but that is not translated into dramatic change in terms of who holds the power or their position vis-a-vis the United States. So regime change? No, we didn't actually do it. It's the same system, a younger face, possibly more radical, definitely more beholden to the hardliners who elevated him. Point number 3, lifting of sanctions. If we capitulate and lift the sanctions as Iran has proposed in their 10-point plan, both the primary and the secondary and the UN sanctions, Iran will recognize financial and economic benefits that they have never before enjoyed. This is actually more detrimental to the security of the Middle East than the JCPOA ever was. Remember when we criticized Obama for sending pallets of cash to Iran? Lifting these sanctions will make those pallets look trivial. Point number 4, a non-aggression guarantee. The United States and effectively Israel must guarantee no future attacks on Iran. Okay. Point 5, recognition of Iran's right to a nuclear enrichment. Now stop and think about this one for just a minute. Operation Midnight Hammer, the initial strike package last June, was sold to the American people as necessary to destroy Iran's nuclear program. The president said that we completely destroyed Iran's nuclear program and claimed a military victory. Then in February, the president told us that Iran was 2 weeks away from having 10 nuclear weapons. Steve Witkoff said that they were probably a week away from industrial-grade bomb-making material. That was the imminent threat. That was the justification for bypassing Congress. That's why we had to act right away. There was no time for debate. We had to go back and finish the job that we previously claimed set Iran back 25 years in their goal to enrich uranium. So we launched Epic Fury. We bombed their enrichment facilities. We bombed their research sites. We killed their leaders and his family. We sent B-2 stealth bombers and launched cruise missiles, all in the name of stopping Iranian nuclear enrichment, fomenting a rebellion, and facilitating regime change. But the nuclear program was Trump's crown jewel. We had to stop them from creating a nuclear program capable of weapons-grade uranium enrichment. And now, 6 weeks later, and 13 dead Americans and billions destroyed in equipment, we're formally recognizing Iran's right to enrich uranium, the thing that we went to war to stop. We just agreed to let them keep doing it. Either the nuclear threat was real and we just surrendered on it, or the nuclear threat was exaggerated from the start and we sent Americans to die for the lie. You have to pick one because both cannot be true. Point number 6, halting IAEA investigations. The nuclear watchdog programs will be reduced or ended. Point number 7, a regional ceasefire, including Lebanon, including groups like Hezbollah. Point number 8, U.S. military withdrawal from the region, or at a minimum, a significant reduction in our presence. To the neocons, and those that are beating the drums of war and salivating over this war like Mark Levin and Lindsey Graham and Laura Loomer and Fox News, and every one of these points represents a loss or a humiliation or a defeat of a stated American objective. But every rational being still considers this ceasefire the greater victory because the alternative was worse, because Americans were dying, because the strait was closed anyway, because we were losing aircraft and ships and bases, because the president was threatening to end an entire civilization, possibly using nuclear weapons, and nobody could explain why. A ceasefire is better than that. Even this ceasefire under these Iranian conditions. But here's the thing that nobody in Washington wants to say out loud. This ceasefire only holds if President Trump puts Israel in check and reclaims the United States' dominant position in this very unfortunate alliance with Israel. Before we talk about what comes next, we need you to understand what this war cost us so far. Not in abstract terms, in equipment, in infrastructure, and in blood. Multiple aircraft have been destroyed by Iranian strikes, including an F-35, an F-15, 2 C-130s, an A-10, multiple helicopters, KC-135 tankers. CENTCOM's naval headquarters in the Middle East was struck, and reports from the region indicate that the base is inoperable and completely uninhabitable. Several other U.S. military bases throughout the Gulf Cooperation Council, the GCC, were hit and heavily damaged. The USS Gerald R. Ford, our most advanced aircraft carrier, suffered near crippling damage and had to evacuate and return to safe port for urgent repairs. The loss of aircraft alone is in the range of $600 million. The total damage will run into the billions. But the dollar figure, it's not the real cost. The real cost is the humiliation, the global admission that the money that we have spent on advanced weapon systems, the systems we told the world were the best in class, the systems we said could project American power anywhere on earth, those systems, they didn't deliver as promised. F-35, I'm looking at you. This is a staggering blow to the perception of the United States as a global hegemon. Our enemies watched, our allies watched, everyone watched. They saw a country that couldn't keep the Strait of Hormuz open. They saw aircraft carriers pushed back beyond striking range. They saw Iranian missiles reach targets we said they couldn't reach because of our missile defense systems and the vaunted Iron Dome. And finally, the cost that you can't put a dollar figure on. 13 American service members are dead. Hundreds are wounded. The official count is 365, but the Intercept puts the real figure above 520. 13 lives in a war of choice, a war that didn't need to be fought, a war that was not waged with proper constitutional authority. One death is too many. 13 is unforgivable. We, veterans, we put our uniforms on to defend America, American interest, American lives, American property, American liberty. These lives were spent on behalf of another nation, a nation that is not truly our ally. So this is what keeps me up at night. If this ceasefire fails, if at the end of these 2 weeks we cannot achieve peace, there's very little doubt that President Trump will escalate. The 82nd Airborne is in position. The United States Marines are in position. The Navy and the Air Force are forward deployed. There are over 75,000 American troops in a region right now. And what alarms me the most is how many of them are National Guardsmen, our Homeland Defense Force, citizen soldiers from the states deployed without a declaration of war. There are 18 states who have their National Guard federalized and sent to fight in the war in Iran. I'm going to walk you through every state because the list, these names, these units, these numbers is my argument. This is what an unauthorized war looks like when you map it onto actual human beings. Let's start with Vermont. The 158th Fighter Wing out of South Burlington was the first Air National Guard unit in the country to fly the F-35s. Hundreds of airmen deployed first to Venezuela for the Maduro operation in December, then immediately redirected to the Middle East without coming home. Virginia, 11 F-22 Raptors flying combat out of Ovda Air Base in Israel, plus 150 soldiers of the 229th Military Police Company are at Camp Arifjan, Kuwait. That's the same facility, by the way, that's been repeatedly struck by Iranian drones and missiles. Wisconsin, over 400 soldiers from the 1st Battalion, 121st Field Artillery Regiment, and the 108th Forward Support Company are operating HIMARS, which are rocket artillery systems in Kuwait and Iraq. In New Hampshire, the day after the New Hampshire State Senate voted down the Defend the Guard legislation, the 157th Air Refueling Wing at Pease Air National Guard Base deployed their KC-46 Pegasus tankers. In late February, this happened right before the war officially began. Kansas, the 190th Refueling Wing out of Forbes Field in Topeka with their KC-135 Stratotankers are the aging backbone of the entire air campaign. Meanwhile, back home, though, retired Kansas Guard generals, 2 major generals, a brigadier general, 2 command chief master sergeants, and a command sergeant major signed a public statement demanding that the Pentagon be transparent about the purpose and the sacrifice of this war. The soldiers are in the fight, and the generals are sounding the alarm. This is new. Move to Tennessee. Air National Guard units out of Knoxville, Memphis, Chattanooga, and Nashville deployed in February before the war started. Mississippi, Army National Guard Green Berets alongside KC-135 tanker crews and C-17 Globemaster airlift units were deployed in unknown and unreported numbers. Mississippi put its most elite soldiers into this fight alongside conventional air assets. Nevada, the 152nd Airlift Wing, the High Rollers, out of Reno, they're operating C-130 transports. Minnesota, Over 250 Guard personnel from the 148th Fighter Wing in Duluth and units in Marshall and Stillwater were on pre-planned deployments when the war began and were immediately absorbed directly into the combat zone. Washington State. There are about 100 airmen from the 141st Air Refueling Wing at Fairchild Air Force Base in Spokane with their KC-135 tankers. This is one of the oldest Guard flying units in the entire country. Ohio. The 121st Air Refueling Wing at Rickenbacker Air Base in Columbus deployed with their KC-135 Stratotankers. Ohio has paid the heaviest price of any Guard unit in this war. 3 of their airmen were killed on March 12th in a KC-135 crash over western Iraq. Captain Seth Koval, 38 years old. Captain Curtis Angst, 30 years old. Technical Sergeant Tyler Simmons, 28 years old. Their names deserve to be spoken, their sacrifice deserves to be honored, and their deaths deserve to be answered by Congress that failed to authorize the war that killed them. Michigan. 12 A-10 Warthogs and their personnel from the 107th Fighter Squadron in Selfridge Air National Guard Base have already been confirmed by the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff that they were hunting and killing fast attack watercrafts in the Strait of Hormuz. Michigan's Guard is in active combat today. Idaho. And I need to pause here because this one's personal. The 190th Fighter Squadron, the Skullbangers, out of Gowanfield Air National Guard Base in Boise. These are my neighbors. These are men and women that I drive past when I go through Boise. 6 of their A-10 Warthogs from Idaho's 190th staged at Pease, New Hampshire, and then they moved to the Middle East, joining 12 more A-10s from Michigan 107th. Some of those Idaho aircraft are already reported to have drone kill markings on their fuselages from missions that they've already flown in theater. The Skullbangers of Gowanfield are hunting fast attack boats in the Straits also, and they were rumored to have participated in the rescue operations of the F-15 weapons safety officer who was shot down last week over Iran. The Idaho National Guard is in an unauthorized war, in a war the Idaho State Legislature had the power to prevent, but couldn't be bothered to even hear the Defend the Guard bill. New York, the Headquarters Battalion, 42nd Infantry Division out of Troy, deployed to Camp Buehring, Kuwait. 150 soldiers in roles including data systems engineers and command support, and one of their soldiers is dead. Major Sorfley Davies, 46 years old, of Queens. He's an Army veteran, a Guard officer, an NYPD officer in his civilian life. He's from the 79th Precinct. He died on March 6th. North Carolina, 2 Guard units, 800 soldiers of the 1st Battalion, 120th Infantry Regiment, part of the 30th Mobile Brigade Combat Team. They're staging in Texas right now and leaving for Kuwait to participate in this war should the ceasefire fail. Their missions have now been absorbed into the combat zone, and the North Carolina Air National Guard's Aeromedical Evacuation Squadron with 48 nurses, medical technicians, and C-17 flight crews deployed to Germany, flying wounded out of the theater back to American bases. Texas, their Guard was activated domestically under Operation Fury Shield, protecting ports, energy infrastructure, and the southern border against potential Iranian retaliatory attacks inside the United States. This is proper use of the National Guard, defense of the homeland. Texas Guard is in this war without ever leaving home soil. And then there's Arkansas. They were called up on April 6th, 3 days ago. Specific units and troop counts are not yet publicly confirmed, but Arkansas is now in the war. We pivot to Iowa. Iowa's story must be told a little bit separately. The Iowa Army National Guard, they're home now, but they deployed under Operation Inherent Resolve in Syria and then rotated largely home right before Epic Fury began. But in December, just a few months ago, before any of this Iran war, 2 Iowa National Guard members were killed by an Iranian drone attack in Syria. Not in Operation Epic Fury, in a different conflict, another one that Congress has never formally declared or authorized. 2 Iowa National Guards have been dead in an unauthorized war before this war even started. 18 states, thousands of citizen soldiers. 4 Guard members are dead in Operation Epic Fury. 2 Iowa Guard members were killed in December in Syria by Iranian drones. 365 officially wounded, and it's probably more than 500. Every single one of them deployed away from their home state and their civilian jobs without a declaration of war. Every governor was uninformed, excluded, or told that their consent was not required, and they were unable to do anything about it. I want you to listen to what the sitting governors from some of these states said about their own National Guard troops. Tennessee Governor Bill Lee, he said that he didn't know how many members or from which bases that the Guard was sent. Once Trump federalized the Guard, Lee had no authority over the troops, even though he's the commander-in-chief of the Tennessee National Guard. His access to information was limited to whatever the administration decided to share. New Hampshire Governor Kelly Ayotte told reporters that she had received a classified briefing but could not share additional details about the nature of the New Hampshire National Guard's activity related to the conflict, including how many Guard members were leaving the state and going overseas or what roles they would be playing. Washington State's military department confirmed that the activation stated that it did not require the approval, consent, or permission from the governor. The governors of American states do not know where their Guard soldiers are. They don't know how many went. They don't know what they're doing. They don't know when they're coming home. Folks, this isn't democracy. This is executive monarchy. And it's exactly what the Defend the Guard legislation was created to stop. For those who are new to this show and to our organization, Defend the Guard is state-level legislation. It would prohibit a state's National Guard from being deployed into active combat overseas unless Congress has officially declared war. It doesn't weaken our military. It doesn't prevent the president from acting in genuine emergency. It simply enforces what the Constitution already requires. Article 1, Section 8 states that Congress has the authority to declare war, not the president, not anybody else. The National Guard belongs to the states until they are properly and legally federalized for a constitutionally authorized purpose. Governors are the commander-in-chief of their Guard, or at least they're supposed to be. But right now, governors are just bystanders. They get a classified briefing if they're lucky and a request to smile for the cameras when the deployment ceremony happens. Defend the Guard would change that. It would give the governors the standing to demand answers. It would give the state legislatures a voice. It would force Congress to do its job. It's the most solemn and heavy duty of Congress. And before another generation of citizen soldiers is sent to die in an undeclared war, we need the states to reassert this authority and force Congress to do their job. Now is the time. Now, in the middle of this conflict, for your state to pass Defend the Guard. It's time for the people to demand it. You can find out more information at defendtheguard.us or on any of our socials at TroopsHomeUS. But you have to decide now, where does this leave us? We have a ceasefire. We paid a terrible price for it. The terms clearly favor Iran. The constitutional questions remain unanswered. The thousands of Guard members are still in the region waiting to see what happens next. And I said at the top of this episode that we should be grateful, and I meant it. But gratitude is not enough. The only way this ceasefire can be considered a real victory, the only way the price that we paid can be considered worth it, is if President Trump does the one thing that he's been hesitant to do. He has got to put Israel back on the shelf. Within hours of the president announcing this ceasefire, Israel bombed apartment buildings in Beirut. Civilian targets. They called it Operation Eternal Darkness. What kind of darkness? What kind of evil is that? What kind of society uses that kind of psychological rhetoric? Operation Eternal Darkness. And then they bomb civilian housing. Israel, they didn't coordinate with Washington. They didn't ask permission. They acted to scuttle the ceasefire agreement that Trump and Iran had agreed to because the ceasefire was not in their best interest. And what was this administration's response? The White House then later said that the agreement with Iran did not include Israel's behavior in Lebanon, that Israel is going to do what Israel is going to do. That's not acceptable. When do we believe that America is going to do what America is going to do? We are the patron. Israel is the client state. We fund their military. We subsidize their economy. We provide diplomatic cover. We send our sons and daughters to fight and die in wars that serve their interests, not ours. And yet we cannot tell them to stand down for 48 hours or 2 weeks while we try to negotiate peace that would benefit the American people and the world as a whole. This is the question that Joe Kent asked when he resigned. We got into this war at the urging of another country. The war didn't go well. And now we can't get out of the war because the same country that drug us into it won't let us. I like to ask why. Why can't this president or any president say no to Israel? And I'm not calling for war with Israel. I'm not calling for hostility at all. I'm calling for a normal, non-abusive relationship between two nations. The kind of relationship that we have with almost every other country on earth. Allies, but with restrictions. Partners, but with red lines. Friends, but not ones who get to exercise veto power over American foreign policy. The majority of Americans across the entire political spectrum understand something that Washington refuses to say out loud, that Israel is no longer a net positive ally of the United States of America. The relationship has cost us trillions of dollars. It has cost us thousands of lives. It has entangled us in conflicts that serve no American interest. And it's corrupted our political system to the point where a foreign government has more influence over our foreign policy than the American people do. And that has to end. Not with hostility, not with punishment, simply with honesty. If people who love Israel, if they want to send their children and their money to go fight and die for that country, that's fine. But not one more American tax dollar, not one more American weapon, not one more American life should be gifted to a nation that can't stop bombing civilians in apartment buildings for a few weeks while we try and negotiate peace. We cannot be a free and prosperous country until we are a sovereign country. And we cannot be sovereign as long as another nation holds veto power over our elected leaders. So President Trump, if you're listening, this is the test. You can accept the ceasefire. You can claim the win. You can take the off-ramp, but none of it means anything if Israel drags us back tomorrow or next week or next month. Restraining Israel is not anti-Semitic. It's pro-American. Putting America first means putting America first. Even when AIPAC doesn't like it, even when Fox News calls you weak, even when the entire foreign policy establishment lines up to tell you that our closest ally is too important to question. They're not too important to question. Nobody is. More scrutiny and ridicule was directed at Joe Kent for asking the hard questions than has ever been directed at Israel and their self-serving interests that entangle our great nation in conflicts and commitments that we would never seek out on our own. The American people, they've earned the right to ask why our sons and daughters are dying in wars that do not serve us. We've earned the right to ask why a country of 9 million people gets to dictate the foreign policy of a country half a world away with 330 million people. And we've earned the right to demand that our president, the man that we elected to put America first, actually does it. So I'm grateful for the ceasefire. I am, Mr. President. We pray that it holds. We honor the 13 Americans who will not come home, and the hundreds who came home wounded, and the thousands who are still over there waiting to return to their families. But gratitude, Mr. President, is not silence, and prayer is not passivity. If you believe what I believe, that the Constitution still matters, that Congress should declare wars, that our troops deserve better than this, then I need you to act. First, show your support for Defend the Guard movement and visit defendtheguard.us and enlist in the movement by signing our petition, adding your name to the growing list of veterans and America First citizens who understand that Congress holds the war powers in our country and the states are the check to the overreach by the executive branch. Number two, I need you to share this episode. Send it to a veteran, send it to a Guard family, send it to anybody who thinks this war was still in America's interest. Number three, pray for peace. Pray that the next 2 weeks bring resolution, not escalation. Pray that the men and women in theater get to come home safe, and pray that our leaders find the courage to do what must be done for the Constitution, for the American people, for the Republic. America must bring our troops home.